It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Buongiorno tutti. Hello, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and this is the Phil Ferguson Show. We are on number 265, show 265. A lot of fun, action-packed stuff for you today. Before I get into all that good, fun stuff, I want to talk about my little trip a little bit. Went to Europe for 3 weeks, and I'm hesitant to call it a vacation per se. Maybe a working holiday is the way to say it, because I did do work. The business is big enough that I can't possibly not respond to emails and phone calls and stuff for a period of 3 weeks. A couple of days is about all I get. So I had to find time in between, either on a train or in the car or a few hours at the hotel room, where I could check up on some emails or make a few phone calls. I got a really cool international Wi-Fi hotspot device and could buy data in other countries and do Skype calls, do things, and be on a relatively secure network because the Wi-Fi connects to a cell phone tower. So I'm not on the hotel or the McDonald's or the coffee shop or the random restaurant's Wi-Fi where I have no knowledge or control over who has access to it. So I think it all went pretty well. There were some people that wanted more time or something more complicated or some more trades to be done. And when possible, I would ask them to wait until I got back. And everyone was very, very nice about that. So I appreciate that. I think one thing that I learned, if I go on a trip again, I will not move as frequently as we did, because then I can schedule time, like a full day. Because as long as I have phone and internet access, I can be sitting in my office, or I can be sitting in a hotel in Boulder, Colorado, say. Not that I'm going there, but just I can be anywhere as long as I have all the equipment and the internet and phone connections. We went through 4 countries: Poland, Czech Republic, Austria, Italy. 4 countries, something like 7 or 8 different cities, all in something around 22 days, including the travel back and forth. So we moved a lot. We saw a lot, but it, of course, is not very restful. It was kind of like, a scavenger hunt, a 3-week-long scavenger hunt. We wanted to see this. We wanted to see that. We wanted to see this. And we did it. We enjoyed it. But I think next time I go somewhere, I'm going to make it a much slower pace where I have more time to just kind of hang out and relax. A couple of thoughts. First country we went to is Poland, and Poland's economy is not as strong as the United States. It's not as strong as a lot of other European countries, and the exchange rate is such that things sometimes works out to be mathematically, comically affordable. It was a very interesting thing. As an example, we took a taxi for about an hour, and it was something like 100 plus zloty is the currency in Poland. It's not the euro, it's the zloty. And I guess the exchange rate is something like 6 or 7 to 1. So that hour-long taxi ride was about $20, which you cannot do in the United States. You cannot do that in Italy, as we found out later. And when we decided to come back, that hour-long ride, we found that there was an Uber available in some cities in Poland. And we took that Uber, and that converted down to like a $5 or $6 Uber ride for an hour. So that was very cool. We stayed in a city called Bydgoszcz because that's where my son spent his exchange year in Poland. Met some of the families that were generous enough and kind enough to have him stay with them while he was in Poland. Wonderful, wonderful people. And when we stayed in Bydgoszcz, my son wanted us to stay in this particular hotel that is considered one of the best hotels in that city, 500,000 person city. and this is the premium hotel. The rooms worked out to be about $50. So that was really nice. Another thing that was really cool about Poland, of course, all the great things that you can see, the wonderful people, nice variety of food, and a lot of people speak English, especially young people. When we went, my son and I went into a store to buy a SIM card for my Wi-Fi device, and the person there spoke fluent English. It was incredibly easy to get things done. There were a few places that people didn't speak English. We had my son with us to help us out, but you probably could find a way to work around it. So Poland was very nice. Near the end of our trip, we did go to Auschwitz and Birkenbau. We also went to salt mines near Krakow. Both of those were phenomenal experiences for obviously different reasons. Very, very much enjoyed, as much as one can, the experiences of both places. So I highly recommend those two locations. And of course, after that, we went to Prague in the Czech Republic. And also there, $1 goes a long way. And also there, anywhere that you're in tourist areas, the restaurants, the shops, there's somebody that speaks some, if not fluent English. And again, a wonderful city. And we had the joy of being there when there was a sudden storm and it poured in the main square in Prague. And we got to be out of the rain and enjoy that scene, just to experience that. Prague also has a lot of wonderful sights, and I don't want to spend the entire podcast doing this, but and then we went to Salzburg in Austria, and we went there because of the Sound of Music, and of course it's a cool city, and saw a lot of sights there, got to see some musical concerts, went on the Sound of Music tour where you sing the songs from the Sound of Music on the bus and see famous sights from that movie. And then after we left Salzburg, we went to an ice mine. And this, not an ice mine, yeah, ice cave, I guess, ice cave. The world's single largest ice cave. Virtually the entire year, it's below freezing in this cave, and water leaks in and freezes. It is more than a mile high, so we were way up high in the mountains, and you had to drive way up high, and then you had to walk, and then there was I don't know what it's kind of like a ski lift, but it was the big cars, and you ride up higher, and then you walk again up the mountainside, and then once you get in the cave, you have 1,400 stairs, 700 up and 700 back down. Wonderful experience, great views, because this cave was way up high in the mountains. And then, of course, after that, we went to Venice and spent some time on the beach in Lido. It's a little area community. I don't know if it's its own city, probably is, outside of Venice. We also spent a day in Verona, home of Romeo and Juliet, and saw sights there, and then a couple days in Milano, including visiting the Duomo, the gigantic church in the middle of Milan. So, like I said, a lot of moving, a lot of transportation. If you have questions about any of those things and you're thinking about going there and you want some suggestions or recommendations, I can try to help you. I'm by no means an expert in most of those cities. I was only there a couple of days. But let me know if you need something. You can, of course, email me, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com, and talk about that or ask me questions about that. I'd be happy to help. Our investing skeptically topic, which we're going to get into next, is regression to the mean, or as John Bogle calls it, reversion to the mean.
Pace e lunga vita.
Lunga vita e prosperità.
Regression to the mean, or sometimes called reversion to the mean, which is the phrase John Bogle uses. I'm going to be talking about some things that he wrote and throwing in some ideas of my own to kind of walk you through this concept. His book, Common Sense on Mutual Funds, which is the third in the three books that I recommend. It's the more complex, more complicated, because it has stuff like this and fun graphs and charts, but it's kind of like my investing Bible, for lack of another word, I guess. But we're going to talk about that, and particularly in Chapter 10, and I think it's called On Reversion to the Mean. I'm pretty sure, yes, it's Chapter 10. And I'm also going to be referring maybe a little bit, if not casually, to a speech that he gave in 2002. and this is called the Telltale Chart. He's doing a little wordplay with the Telltale Heart story poem by Edgar Allan Poe, which is one of my favorites. So this is kind of cool. In both places, he talks about this. If you want to find the link, I'm hoping you can search for the Telltale Chart. I'll try to put a link in the show notes if I can remember to do that, because I forget all the time to do that. And it's also part of Bogle Financial Markets Research Center. So hopefully if you Google those words, you can find this pretty easily. Like I said, the presentation he gave was in 2002, so it's dated a little bit, but the concept remains the same. And of course, the Common Sense on Mutual Funds 10th anniversary, I think this is 2009, was the 10th anniversary. I'm actually hoping somewhere in the next year they come up with a 20th anniversary with another update, because the 10th anniversary had an update, which was really cool for me. Anyway, so before I really get into regression to the mean or reversion to the mean and what it really means, I'm going to give you an example of something that is not regression to the mean or doesn't experience regression to the mean. And it's an example I give all the time because I think it works pretty well. If you have a conventional quarter, US dollars 25 cents, 1/4 of a dollar, and you flip that 10 times in a row, and assuming it's a conventional, normal, properly balanced, whatever quarter, and you get 10 heads in a row, you would consider that to be unusual. But if you have 10 heads in a row, what is the chance, what are the odds that the next flip is going to be tails? Assuming it's a conventional quarter, it's still 50-50. The 10 heads in a row that you just had tells you nothing about what is going to happen in the next flip, assuming something isn't rigged. It's still 50-50. So that historical information, the 10 previous flips, not only don't tell you anything valuable, they run the risk of misleading you, and you might think that that's valuable. And since there's been a bunch of heads, you now can expect a tails. So a quarter doesn't show regression to the mean. A roulette wheel, lottery numbers, at least they shouldn't if it's a legitimate lottery, don't show regression to the mean. What has happened in the past, the most popular lottery numbers, doesn't tell you anything about what's going to happen in the future. The question is investing the same way? I am of the opinion, and maybe this is more just a personal opinion, but individual stocks do not show regression to the mean. So if a stock has done really well, it doesn't mean it's more likely to come back down. And definitely if a stock falls dramatically, it doesn't mean it's more likely to do well. So you can't use the historical data on an individual stock. But for the stock market as a whole, we have 200 years of data showing that the ongoing regular average return is around 10%. I say around 10% because it varies depending on when you start and when you end the calculation, but it's around 10%. And if you get a couple of years where the stock market makes more than it would normally make, it actually increases the possibility that it's going to underperform at some point going forward. It doesn't always follow this way because you can have 2 good years followed by a 3rd good year. Well, the 2 really good years might indicate it's less likely, but it could still happen. So you don't want to get too carried away with this. It doesn't work weekly, daily, or monthly, but over long periods of time. So if the stock market makes 10% a year and you get a period of time, like say the late 90s with the dot-com bubble, where the stock market makes 25 to 35% per year, year after year after year, it becomes more and more likely that the market's going to underperform. So the stock market as a whole does experience in years, many years, this thing called regression to the mean. And unfortunately, you can have it in big sweeping time periods where the market might beat the average for 3 to 5 or 8 or 10 or 12 years. So at some point, it will revert back towards the mean or past the mean to counterbalance. The question is, you just don't know when. And so if you look at the 200 years of data that's available, it says you can't really know. So the only thing to do is to be invested in everything all the time in perpetuity. That works really well. You're going to beat most investors, and most investors will end up in mutual funds that they've done a little bit of research, or their salesperson did a little bit of research and recommends that they buy. But there is an opportunity over the intermediate term, or what I call the short term, 3 to 5 years. Some people call short term a couple of hours. Some people call it weeks or days or months or a couple of years. For me, the short term is kind of like 3 to 5 years. So if you get a period of 10 or 12 years where the market outdoes performance by a considerable amount, I'm more inclined to invest in something else. If the market has a really, really big drop, catastrophically bad, like in 2008, it went down 37%, and particularly once the catalyst for that, or the underlying problem that caused that big drop, goes away, I now think the market's underperformed, and not only is it likely to do better, it's likely to do more better than what it would normally. And in that scenario in 2009, after the market fell 37%, the next year it went up 30%. And now we're in this period where we've had this luxurious, albeit possibly scary scenario where since the drop in 2008, the market's gone up technically in a couple of years, only barely, but every year for 9 years, almost to the point of 10 years now. But it's not gotten really crazy, but it's a little bit above the average, so I'm not too worried, because you don't want to second guess this too much. It can be overdone. But one of the things that I do is I use that information and I break up the U.S. stock market into 6 segments that I call, just to not have confusion with sector funds. And the 6 segments are large cap growth and value, mid cap growth and value, small cap growth and value. And of course, what prompted this is someone sent me an email saying, "Hey, Phil, I found this data that shows in the long run, again, something pushing 100 years, small caps have outperformed large caps by 1.5% to 2%. And one of the questions, of course, is, does that mean I should have all my money, or most of my money, or the vast majority of my money in small caps? I think the answer to that is no. Small caps have shown this pattern over 100 years. However, the vast majority of that effect is at the very beginning of the time period. So you can get weird things that happen as examples with looking at historical data. If a mutual fund, or if a segment or a sector did particularly well the first year, maybe it was some fluke, maybe they happened to buy the exact right time, and that segment did better than everything else for a year. Let's say the market went up 8 and that segment went up 22. If for the next 9 years they both do the same, you can still say over 10 years, this segment that outperformed by 2 or 3% per year for the last 10 years. However, what really happened is it had one amazing year, and then the next 9 years, it matched the other indice or index or whatever you're measuring it against. So a more truthful, more accurate statement would be you had one amazing year and then 9 years where you match the market. So if 1 year, 10 years ago happened to be good, does that mean you should put more money into that investment? And I don't think it does. And this works out, and now I'm going to the book that John Bogle wrote, again, chapter 10. He has some nice charts where he looked at well-diversified U.S. stock funds and looked at their results or their performance for an entire decade and then said, well, they did really well for a decade. What did they do in the next decade? And so the 2 decades he started with were 1970s and then the 1980s. And he looked at all these funds in the 70s and he broke them up into 4 quartiles. So you have the top 25%, the next 25%, the next 25%, and then the bottom 25%. And the top 25% performance mutual funds in the 1970s beat the market by 4.8% per year for an entire decade. So that's pretty darn good. So the question is, what did they do in the 80s? Well, their average return in the 80s was 1% below per year compared to the index. The second quartile is +1 to -1. Now, the third quartile was -1 to -2, so it didn't get better. But the fourth quartile, the absolute worst performing funds, lost 4% per year, or underperformed 4% per year compared to the market in the 70s, but did much better, only -2% per year in the 80s. And then he looked at this again, comparing the 1990s to the first decade of the 2000s. And the effect is the same, and you have this incredibly experience here with the worst quartile in the 90s. Now, keep in mind, the worst performing funds in the 90s, the ones that were farthest behind, probably had nothing to do with dot-coms, probably had nothing to do with technology. And so during those late years in the 90s, when everything was doing great, they did awful. And so for the entire 1990s, the worst 25% of all mutual funds that were general U.S. stock funds, they underperformed the market by 7.2%. But the very next decade, the 2000s, 2000 to 2009, they beat the market by 8.3%. So that's a pretty big swing from underperforming by 7.2 to overperforming by 8. The ones that did the best, by the way, that beat the index by 2.4, then underperformed the index by about 1% per year for an entire decade. And this is one of the problems with doing research on mutual funds. Now, in this case, it's looking at many, couple hundred mutual funds. But if you look at one mutual fund that has a really good 3, 5, or 10-year track record, it doesn't mean, and matter of fact, it might even be bad news if it's outperformed the index over the previous decade, because it might actually be more likely to underperform going forward, because this reversion or regression to the mean happens to mutual funds as it happens to the entire stock market. So looking at the historical data doesn't tell you what you should buy. And I'm going to give you a specific example of someone that I've actually talked to, and they may know who they are. And I just want to make sure that they understand I'm not picking on you. This happens to virtually everybody. It just so happens that we've recently talked about this, and I had it available in my mind. So please forgive me for using your specific example. I won't give their name or information or anything, but I am going to talk about one of the funds that they own. And this fund is the letter C, if you wanted to Google it yourself, LCEAX. And this is Invesco Diversified Dividend Fund Class A. So the first thing you need to know is if it has a letter hanging out randomly at the end of the name, it's a load fund. And in this case, I'm pretty sure the load was 5.5%. I'm trying to pull this up here in real time. So you pay 5.5% at the very beginning to buy this fund. So if you invested, I just got it at 5.5%. If you invested $100,000, only $94,500 actually gets invested. So you've got to make 6-7% just to break even. And the other thing that I noticed about this fund, and I see this on a regular basis, someone will send me a statement. And please do not just out of the blue send me a statement. At least make sure that you've sent me an email with your phone number and we've talked for a couple of minutes to make sure you're sending it to the right place before you send anything. But I'll see when people send me their statements from an advisor or a broker or other places like that, what they'll happen to have is funds that are really, really good at the time they were recommended, but they're not good now. And this happens on a regular basis because most advisors are going to do what I don't blame them for doing. When they recommend mutual funds to you, they're going to show you a list of funds that are all beating the market. They're all beating the indices because they have competitive pressure from schlubs like me saying index, 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 index. And so it's a very easy sales pitch and a nice marketing tool for them to say, here's all the different diversified funds that I'm recommending. And look, almost all of them match their respective index or beat it. So we're going to look a little bit at this Invesco Diversified Dividend Fund Class A. And it started in 2002. And if you look at it through 2007, 2008, it's beating the market on average 1 or 2 points a year. Ironically, most of that happened in a couple of years. And again, like we talked about just a few minutes ago, if you have a couple really good years, it can carry you forward if you keep including those numbers in the average. But when you look going forward, its performance in '08 and '09 is no better, and maybe a little worse than the market. It doesn't beat the market in 10 or 11 or 12. And in some years, it's a point or two above, a point or two below. And then somewhere around 2015, it kind of goes off the rails. Now, I don't know if this is because of reversion to the mean or something weird happened with the mutual fund company that runs this. But here's what we have in data. And again, I pulled this up on Morningstar.com. You can go look it yourself. Again, the symbol is LCEAX. Over the last 10 years, it's had an average return of 8.54%, which is 1.21% behind the S&P 500. It's a large cap fund. It's got a slight value tilt to it. So, it shouldn't do that poorly, but, it's not killer compared to how some other funds were doing. But over the last 5 years, it's underperformed by 4.49. In 3 years, it's underperformed by 5.95% per year. And in the last 12 months, ending the time that I'm recording this around June 18th, it's underperformed the S&P 500 by 15.05% in the last year. Now, the funny thing is that it's probably only really been broken. I pulled it up on Google to compare it to the S&P 500 since its inception. And somewhere around, like I said, 15 or 16, something changed somehow, some way, and they're missing out on the market going up. So they're dramatically underperforming the market. So an advisor would not recommend that fund to you now. So sometimes when someone sends me a list of all the funds that they own currently from another advisor or broker, I can build them in and pull them up in Morningstar or Google Finance, and I can look and see there's a period of time where they beat the market, but then there's a period of time where they haven't beaten the market, or they've matched the market or significantly underperformed the market. And if they all happen to do that about the same time, I can talk to somebody and go, did you set this portfolio up and get all these investments about 5 or 6 years ago? And they go, well, yeah, actually I did. How did you know that? Because it's a neat trick. So the advisor, not being a fool, wants to show you funds that are performing well. The ironic thing is the funds that are performing well and or beating the index are no more likely to beat it going forward, and they're more likely to come down to something closer to the average or the mean, at least for that specific category. And if I can circle back around to the original email I received about small caps beating large cap stocks, depending on the starting date and the ending date of the data that you look at, it's true that in the past, small cap stocks have outperformed large cap stocks. The question is, will it always do that? And even in that data, the first 18 years, and we're talking about 1928 going forward, the first 18 years, small caps did outperform. But is that because they lost even more in the Great Depression? I don't know. We didn't go back a couple more years. There's always a couple more years, at least theoretically, you can go back, but the data gets harder and harder to get. The interesting thing is that from 1945 to 1964, large cap stocks beat small cap stocks by almost 3% a year for a period of almost 20 years. So if you had looked at the historical data in 1945 and said, wow, small caps are the way to go, over the next 20 years, you would have underperformed. And then small caps popped for several years, just crushed large caps in the 60s, and then they didn't. And so it goes back and forth, whether small caps do better than large caps. So the question is, now that small caps have this track record, if you slice off the first 18 years, there is no improvement in small caps compared to large caps. If you go forward a few more years, maybe large caps still beat out small caps. It's close enough that if you can play with the starting date and the ending date, it gets kind of funky. The other thing to keep in mind is that calculating this data for thousands, literally thousands and thousands of stocks almost 100 years ago gets a little foggy. Another question that is, when does a stock stop being small cap and becomes large cap? Apple, when it started, was a very, 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 very small company. Now it's not. So at some point, Apple was a small company stock, and then it was a mid-size company, and now it's one of the largest of the large. Do those returns all contribute back to getting credit when you bought it as a small cap? Or do you stop losing credit when it becomes a mid-size cap or a large cap and it no longer counts to the small cap category? What is that arbitrary line that you're going to draw where one leaves one category and goes to another category? You can also have a company like Enron, which went to nothing in a period of weeks. Well, at some point, does it get recharacterized as a mid cap and a small cap and it loses all the money from there? Because if you do that, you could say the large cap Enron only lost 60% of its value because it's no longer a large cap. Now it's a mid cap. And then in mid cap, it loses half of its value. And then it becomes reclassified as a small cap. And look, as soon as it entered the small cap category, it then went to zero. It lost 100% in small cap. So if you count things that way, every company that ever goes broke loses the most money, at least as far as a percentage measurement, while they are a small cap stock. So it's tricky to figure this out. So I don't put a whole lot of weight on these long run numbers of small versus large cap stocks. The other thing that people often come to me is they'll hear data about growth versus value, or low price stocks versus high price stocks, where the share is $2 versus $80 a share, or dividend stocks or low dividend stocks tend to do this or they tend to do that. It may have happened in the historical data. That doesn't mean it's going to happen in the future. And I think if you go long enough, all of this stuff tends to work out to about the same. So that would make the argument that then if they all work out eventually the same, it doesn't matter if you buy a small cap value fund with 100% of your money, or if you buy a total stock market or all large cap growth, in the end, it all works out the same. Well, I'm not sure I'm ready to accept that either, because in the intermediate time periods, one of the things I was just talking about, when large caps dominated for many, many years, what drives that kind of thing? Or when small caps in 1968 or 64 through 68 dramatically, wildly outperformed large caps, is that a sign that they're going to keep doing that going forward? Or is that a sign you should start to counterbalance out of them? And that's the kind of the philosophy I like to use. So knowing that we do have this regression to the mean, and knowing that things tend to work out in the end, I invest in all of the segments of the U.S. stock market. Again, I break it up into 6 segments: large cap growth and value, mid cap growth and value, small cap growth and value. And I take into account a little bit things that happen in the economy, like interest rates or trends, and I'll make very small, we're talking a couple percentage points adjustments. But one of the other things that I will do is, if one or two of those segments does really, really well compared to the other 4 or 5, I might either shrink them, or if you're in retirement, you take the money out of those that are doing great. If you're adding money, you add money to the ones that are lagging behind, because eventually that's going to help you catch up. And it's very close to rebalancing. So we'll do the rebalancing, but sometimes we'll overweight in things. Like right now, I'm slightly overweighting in small companies because interest rates are still low, and they're going up, but they're still low. And small companies tend to, not always, but tend to do a little bit better when interest rates are low, because they are often more leveraged and borrow more money. So when money is cheap, small companies kind of sort of do better. I'm also a little concerned, and I've talked about this on the show before, with really large cap growth stocks in that segment. So I'm now underweighting that by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6%, at least compared to value. So, we make those adjustments, but overall, it's an embracement of owning everything, knowing that we don't know when the market as a whole is going to go up or going to go down, and then kind of making some adjustments along the way based on performance. So that's some information and some thoughts on reversion to the mean, or I've always called it regression to the mean. Again, John Bogle's book, Common Sense on Mutual Funds, Chapter 10 covers it. And I also pulled a little bit of data out of his talk called The Telltale Chart. That's hard for me to say for some reason. The Telltale Chart. I'm going to wrap that up. We'll take a little break and we'll come back with our interview. All right, everybody, welcome back. Of course, you are still listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. Today with me, I have a longtime good friend, Aron Ra. How are you, sir?
I'm doing particularly well. This is probably a high point in my life.
Excellent. I'm so delighted to hear that. And how is the Texas weather now?
It's hot, It's not too terribly bad. It's all good. I had dear old friends coming by for a barbecue a few days ago. I had my family over for homemade chili a few days before that. I was cooking a lot more for entertaining a bit, and it's been good.
Well, I'm in a new phase of my life myself. I have to now officially and formally be careful with consuming triglycerides and polyglycerides and things that block your arteries, and got diagnosed as pre-diabetic, so I have some new medicines to take. It's great fun.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, the most medical situation that I have right now is that my wife and I enjoy our food so incredibly spicy that we've had to install a bidet.
Well, I think that would be a good investment then. Money well spent in the end.
In the end, yes. Anything to keep you cool.
That too shall pass. So we have got a lot of stuff going on. As a matter of fact, you and I will be meeting in just a couple of weeks in, July 7th, I think?
Yes, sir.
You and I are going to both be on location right outside of Ken Ham's ARK to Ignorance for the... I guess it's the second, and was the third time, but 2 full years. I guess it's the third annual meeting. But
yeah, I wasn't able to make the one last year. I was upset about that, but I did. I went to the first one.
Yeah,
and I toured the ARK. Not kidding. I walked side by side of Bill Nye and Ken Ham.
Well, you had me at Bill Nye, and then you ruined it. So, yeah, that's a bizarre thing. And of course, Ken Ham is now complaining. Not that he doesn't do anything different, but he's complaining that the all-powerful atheists are undermining his God and making it hard for him to make money and making it hard for the community to get all of the benefits he's promised because they aren't getting them.
Well, God only has so much power, and any 2 or 3 atheists can take him out.
Yeah,
it's strange how much power we wield.
Wherever 2 or more atheists gather in our own names, I guess is the way that's going to work. Well, other fun thing I'm just going to throw out there, it's very topical, and the show's going to go out right away after we record. And I was not aware of this until just recently, that Trump apparently reversed, and he's not going to separate kids now. Is that what you heard?
Yeah, I heard that, and what was amazing wasn't it just yesterday that he was saying that it was the Democrats that left it this, and that's forcing him to abide by this law. What are we going to do about the Democrats? We need their votes to change this. And
it's biblical to obey the law, which is what brings it full circle back to my apparently my lifelong passion to try to diminish the influence of religion in the world. He's saying that we don't really have a choice. We kind of have to separate and abuse these kids because the Democrats made a law. Yeah.
And the other thing is that he was literally holding them hostage to try to get support for his build the wall plan.
Yeah, it's a really, really unfortunate thing. And I just, did you see the video of him hugging the flag?
Yeah, that's yeah. Oh, yeah, I did.
Oh, I just don't. I have to pace myself. I made a personal rule. I cannot watch more than 1 hour of MSNBC per day. Because I'm afraid I'll start shaking or foaming at the mouth or something. But
I was happy to see. I mean, I read the news a couple of days ago that said that all four of the former first ladies that were alive now were criticizing Trump over this, and I was thinking, well, shouldn't it be all five of the living first ladies? And finally, I guess the fifth one spoke up, and that's when he recanted. Well, it wasn't, of course, his wife's suggestion. He says that she took part of it, but he credits Ivanka more than anyone else.
Oh,
I would have thought
nice.
that it would have been a whole team worth of people, like maybe the other Republican senators that were basting him over this.
Well, I'm sure
when Ted Cruz is on the moral side,
it's a rough thing, and I was waiting for Republicans to start doing what they finally apparently started doing. I wish they would have done it more publicly, but I guess they were going to him and like, dude, you're killing us. We can't get elected in this climate. We can't win popular office and support you if you're kidnapping children. It's just, that's uncool.
Yeah. That was really bad PR. And what strikes me as strange is the people who insist. I've had people tell me that Trump never lies.
Yeah,
and people in my family that would say that.
I wish I could doubt
so I'll
that.
send like a dozen videos. Here Trump lies about this. Here Trump lies about X. Here Trump lies about Y, and we show proof of that, right?
Yeah.
And then when I confront that person again, I go, "Did you see any of that?" Well, yeah, but he's being honorable now. When does it matter? When does it matter that somebody's lying? Why can't you admit? Okay, well, yeah, he's the best they can do is, well, Hillary lied too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You know what? She did. Yeah, she really did. She told like 2 lies that I'm aware of, and he's told 3,000 plus.
Yeah, I'm sure Hillary has told more lies than the number you just mentioned.
I'm only aware of 2.
Yeah, I'm sure I have. I mean, I don't want to start with a position of not telling lies. You know, as humans, from time to time, we tell reasonably, hopefully, amount of lies for generally good purposes, not always nice, but come on.
I know I'm a freak because I'm just really averse to that. I put lies in the same category as violence. So I try really hard not to even exaggerate.
Yeah, I'm nowhere near as dogmatic, I guess, about it, but I do have my saying that I've lived by for years is that I'm too stupid to remember the lies, so I don't bother.
Yeah, somebody was criticizing me once upon a time because he would say something like, if you touch my fork, I'll kill you, or something like that. He says we all do that, and I'm like, no, I don't do that.
Yeah.
If I tell you, if you do this, I will kill you. Understand that
you probably meant it.
I'm actually going to kill you.
Well, it's funny. My wife and I learned very early on with children, one of the most valuable things you can do is avoid hyperbole with your kids. And I've seen people do it like, if you do that, I'm going to cut your arm off. I'm going to pull your arm off, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. And after 10, 20, 50 times of a child hearing that, they know they can ignore their parent. You completely eviscerate any power you have over them if you continually say you're going to do something dramatic, and then you don't, and they know, yeah, that's just what mom and dad say. It's stupid.
Yeah, I've played with my kids when it's obvious playtime, and I say, oh, you do that, and I'll twist your feet off and staple them onto the wrong legs and make you walk funny.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, and see, they know that's value. I mean, it's funny maybe, but that you're not gonna do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, enough about kids stuff. You have your own podcast YouTube-y thing. What is that?
I try to do something a little different than a lot of people have been doing. I mean, I don't just want to complain. I mean, everybody complains. And so I try to talk to somebody that's actually doing something, not just coming up with an idea, which is rare, but I mean, more than that. I want to talk to somebody that's actually doing something to make things better. And so on my podcast, I do my very best to find activists or politicians, inventors, engineers, whatever, that are actually tackling a problem and doing something to make the world better. Now, lately, all I've been able to talk to is authors because, strangely, it's hard to find people who are actually taking action to make the world a better place.
Well, they're busy. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's true. And a
Complainers
lot of
have
these
time.
people that have made inroads of this, the people I really want to talk to, I'm afraid, are out of my price range. Because I need somebody that's willing to sit down on a voluntary basis to be interviewed for 20 minutes to an hour, and it's hard to get that with a lot of the people that I really, really want to celebrate. There are people out there who are making huge progress. There are also people that I'd like to talk to, and I'd like people to email me and let me know this is the person we need to talk to. I mean, like people who are going through the trouble of bringing water to African countries where they have no clean drinking water, things like that. Any sort of charity where you're actually doing something, and you've gone there to try to fix it. If you want to talk about the palm oil crisis, if you even know what the palm oil crisis is. Then I'd like to talk to you about what can we do about that sort of thing.
What is the palm oil crisis?
Palm oil is something that is in use for practically everything. I mean, we have all these different products that are based on palm oil, and as a result, they've been deforesting a lot of Borneo and a lot of other tropical places to the expense of the habitats of elephants, rhinos, orangutans, and a number of other animals that they're all endangered because of it. Elephants particularly. So, I mean, like Borneo has lost, I think it was roughly 75% of their foresting just in the last couple decades over the growing of palm oil or producing of palm oil.
Harvesting, I guess.
Yeah. So there's an app that you can download on your phone so your phone will read barcodes of products to tell you whether this is sustainably produced palm oil, because there actually is a palm oil crisis. All of the tropical forest areas are being harvested, being eradicated and turned into farmland at the expense of all the natural wildlife. And, of course, that means elephants and orangutans and rhinos are all endangered because of this, as well as a few others.
Well, I would hope at some point they see the value in harvesting palm oil, and they set aside generous parts of land where they can plant trees in rotation and hopefully do it. The
problem is when
enough.
You get into the grassroots, when you get into people that don't have much money, and this is the market, they're going to clear this land and they're going to grow it because they need the meager sustenance they can get to feed their families. You can't boycott palm oil. We use it in too many things. But there has to be some way of producing it sustainably without also impacting, the poor farmers. And one of the biggest problems that we have is, frankly, we just have so many people. Yeah. Just in general, I mean, we can just stop there. We have so many people, but the way that poor people in various countries have to sustain themselves, they have to turn to means that are not going to work in the long term.
Yeah, they're not sustainable. It's like in the past when we relied on wood for heat and cooking food. There were occasionally entire civilizations that wiped out every scrap of wood and cut down every tree. You can see it coming. But what can you do? Because you have to cook your meal. You have to get through the next day, and you can worry about the problem that's coming in 10 years, and then next thing you know, it's 10 years, and now it's a big problem.
Sadly, a lot of people can't see this coming.
Yeah.
And it's a very frustrating thing. I needed to get a job once upon a time when I was a young man, and I was offered a position in this up in Alaska, where I was going to be like canning fish and all that, because they had all of these fisheries up there.
Yeah.
And they had all of these ships, and they had more and more boats every year fishing this in the Alaskan waters, but they started doing an alternate thing where they would only do the canning every other year instead of every year, because although they had more and more ships, collectively they were bringing in fewer and fewer fish.
Yeah.
Now, can you extrapolate from that data what that means?
It reminds me when I was in high school, and this was a long time ago. My parents took me and my brothers to Maine, and we went on a boat, and we went, deep sea cod fishing, which, it probably wasn't that deep, but it wasn't that far. But it was cod fishing, and we went on this fishing boat, and it was all decked out for tourists, and we put shrimp. They gave us fresh shrimp. We put them on a hook and dropped it to the bottom, and then pulled it up a few inches off the bottom of the seabed, and waited for a cod to bite it. And you pull up the cod, and they would cut them apart and fillet them there. And we took all the fish that we caught. And we went to our campground and cooked all that on a wood fire and just had a great time. And I wanted to share that experience with my kids. So several years ago, we took them, and the boat had to go farther and farther and farther out. And we got a couple of cod. I mean, collectively as a boat. I don't think we caught any. We caught all kinds of different fish. And one of the things that we would catch was this incredibly hideous, spiky fish that the fishermen all said taste like crap. And so they take them off the hook and they throw them in the water. And the guy says, we keep finding more and more of these, and we have no idea why. And
wow.
I thought, I raised my hand. I can explain it.
I've been told by so many people who don't understand, who think that it is impossible for mankind to drive any species to extinction because they believe that they're protected by God.
Yeah.
How could man change the environment? It doesn't matter how much toxic pollutants we pump out through all of our industries around the world. We can never change the atmosphere.
Yeah, it is truly boggling to think that people accept that, and I know that they do. Thankfully, a smaller percentage where I live than where you live in general terms, but it's around everywhere. And, we were just a few minutes ago talking about politics, and that has become a big part of this administration. Whether Trump's an atheist or not, he is using the power of religion to unite people in stupid, insane things, but he's utilizing it.
Yeah, I don't think for a moment that Trump is an atheist. That's just ridiculous. So he's not religious, but he's convinced that there's a God, but he doesn't think that the God, like most people, he thinks that God understands exactly why he does everything he does, and his God hates everything he hates for the same reason he hates it.
Isn't that
everybody's
incredible?
God is that way?
Yeah,
that's why your magic imaginary friend always forgives you for everything you've done. He understands your bullshit excuse.
So you're not pro-religion right now. Is that what I hear? I'm real perceptive. I'm picking up on this.
Yeah, which reminds me of something that I'm very excited about. I'm always excited about upcoming events, like doing this ARK encounter thing like we're going to do. But a month after that, I got a unique opportunity, something I've never experienced before. That I've been invited to do a quasi-debate sort of confrontation at a mega church in Chandler, Arizona. And they've extended beyond that. They've offered me to do something that I think is a unique opportunity. I'm really excited about. They want me to give a 1-hour lesson on the basics of evolution and the facts to prove the theory.
Wow!
In a creationist megachurch.
That is amazing. You could change lives that day. I'm
excited.
Yeah.
I'm going to give the best primer on evolution that anybody ever could. I'm so stoked about this opportunity. I mean, and I understand that. I mean, I've heard. I don't want to speak for people when I can't really get inside their minds. But I've seen other people say or admit that they want to hear, the evolutionist argument so that they can find holes in it, that they can find something to, so they can find some excuse to argue against. That's just not going to work with me. You're welcome to try. But as you said, this is going to change people's minds.
Yeah.
Now, it certainly isn't going to convert everybody that's determined not to accept, because I've had people many, many times in my life, I've had people tell me that these may be what the facts are, but I prefer to believe this.
Yeah. You have that. Just like I had, I guess, an acquaintance, I don't know what I'd call him a friend, but a guy I've known for several years, runs his own little church. He has dreams of being a big mega church minister, but right now he's just got a little church. And he wanted to come on my show because I clearly didn't understand true Christianity, and if he could have just an hour to explain it, it would be understood by all my listeners, and everyone would become a Christian. And I said, okay, I tell you what, I'll make you a deal. You come on my show for 1 hour, uninterrupted. I won't badger you. I won't hassle you. You just talk. Maybe I'll throw in a few questions to clarifications. You talk for an hour, and I have thousands and thousands of listeners, and then I come to your church for 1 hour where you have 50 people, and I talk uninterrupted and explain to them why religion isn't true, and he goes, well, there's no way I could let you do that. And I was like, but you talk to these people in your congregation every week for years, and you think one hour presentation is going to be a problem for them, but yet you think in one hour presentation you can deconvert all of my listeners? I mean, where's your faith, man? But,
yeah.
But,
and you know, I want to stress something. I mean, when I give this presentation, although I am an official representative of American Atheist and I'm an anti-theist unapologetically, my presentation at this megachurch in Chandler, Arizona, will not be an attack of theism. It won't be an attack of Christianity. It's not going to be an attack at all.
Yeah.
It will be a lesson on what we can prove that we actually know to be true about evolution. And it will address a number of misconceptions that are popularly, misrepresented or whatever. But I'm also going to be going through a history of the discovery of various aspects of evolution by scientists who identify as Christians or even identify as Bible-believing Christians or even traditional Christians. And yet they still unlock these secrets and endorse the evolutionary process. So when you get into creationism, however, creationism actually produces more atheists than atheists do, honestly.
Yeah.
Because people see such hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Coming from the creation. It's because they're so hardcore into it.
Well,
and they have to be so dishonest in their misrepresentations.
Yeah. So when
this kind of extremity tends to polarize people.
Yeah, and it's just like my kids, and virtually everyone they know, they look at the current connection of politics and religion, and they want to throw it both away. I mean, they're not separable anymore. They see it as young adults as religion and politics and money all together is ruining the country, and we need to get past all that stuff.
You know what? I have to agree with you. I mean, but the thing is we can dispense with religion. We could all just give up religion tomorrow. But if you have two people living on the planet, you're going to have politics.
No doubt about it. I just wanted to make sure for the listeners, I want to make sure I give exact details on the ARK Encounter protest. God damn it, I can't freaking talk tonight. It is July.
You just said, God damn it.
Yeah, hypocrite. I did. No, Thor, damn it. July 7th is the event. It's 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And what you do is you drive to the ARK as if you're going to go visit the ARK. And when you get off the nearest highway, there is a little patch of land where the exit ramp hits the local road. That's where we're going to be protesting. So it's really easy to find. The stated address is 1 ARK Encounter Drive, but we're not actually meeting per se in front of the ARK entrance. It's just a quarter of a mile away in this big open plain. If you show up there at 10 o'clock, and of course this is outside of Williamstown, Kentucky, and it's put on by the Tri-State Freethinkers. I think I've got that right.
Yeah.
A tri-state area atheists and skeptics is what the host thing here on Facebook says. But if you're,
I want to throw in something too. I mean, while there will be people standing there with picket signs, that's not all we're going to be doing.
Yeah, and we'll cover some of that. But if you want to show up, I mean, if you're within 8-hour drive of Cincinnati, this is just south of Cincinnati. So anywhere in Ohio, most of Indiana, most of Illinois, Kentucky, the southern states. You can all drive to this ARK Encounter. It goes from 10 till 2. There's going to be maybe a meet and greet and dinner afterwards if you can stay and get one night in a hotel, or you can drive back home. But yeah, like you said, we're going to all be there with our signs and protesting. And if you recall, what else did we do 2 years ago?
We had a rally later on in Cincinnati where we stood out in the sun for a little bit with our picket signs and everything. And we did have some fun times with that because Eric Hovind showed up, and we got to argue with what is the most, I don't know if there's a legal polite way I can describe him, and I think that's probably the best description. He can't be legally politely described.
I could probably legally, but I don't know about the polite thing.
Yeah, but we had a rally in Cincinnati, but we're not going to do the rally in Cincinnati this time. We're going to do the rally on site. So we're going to be doing, like motivational short, presentations. I mean, not full on long eggheady kind of things, but there are going to be a number of speakers up there who want to keep the crowd upbeat, and I'm certainly going to be upbeat. I'm upbeat now, and that's not going to fade.
Well, I'm thinking that I've heard rumors that I might be the MC, so I might have to introduce everybody. And so if you're willing to play along, I was thinking that maybe what I'll do, and they may end up having someone else do it, I'm fine. I'll do whatever the cause needs me to do. I might go up there when you're next, and I'll say, our next speaker doesn't need an introduction, and then I'll just drop the mic and walk off the stage. What do you think?
I am not that big-headed. I mean, I always get really great introductions. The man who needs no introduction, and people really want to blow a lot of smoke. But honestly, I mean, I go to the store every day, and I'm hardly ever recognized by anybody, and I don't even look like most people. I mean, you would think that I would get recognized on the street, but that didn't happen. I was recognized more times in one night in Amsterdam than I am on any given year here.
Now, were you actually recognized, or did you think people recognized you because you were smoking something?
Believe it or not, I don't imbibe.
Yeah, that's true. We've talked about that. That's not your thing.
Yeah, I know I look like it. And it's funny. My wife was considering moving to Canada at one point. She's trying to talk me into going to Canada, and Canada just legalized marijuana.
Yeah, I saw.
And I want to move to a place where marijuana. You know what? I don't. I'm going to correct myself. I appreciate any place that has decriminalized marijuana, not for my own interest, because it could be legal everywhere, and I still wouldn't be smoking.
Yeah.
But I recognize that in a strange way, there's a correlation with progressive attitude. I mean, if you're going to decriminalize marijuana, look what Colorado did.
Yeah.
Look what Utah, or not Utah. What is it? Oregon. What Oregon did, where you take all of the excess revenue that the state has suddenly made, and then you put it back into socialist systems. You put it back into education, public education. And hospitals and everything that the people that usually call you on the phone for donations because they're not getting sufficient support from the federal government, even when they're supposed to be federally funded. And now they can be. And now, like Oregon, for example, got so much revenue out of legalizing marijuana that they had a tax-free day.
Yay.
Where they suddenly, for one day, they didn't have to pay taxes on anything. And here's a bigger picture. And this is something that bothers me. If you want to achieve everything that the Republican Party, for example, keeps promising to do. If you want to achieve all those things, just do the exact opposite of everything the Republican Party is doing.
Yeah.
You'll get there. So if you were to legalize marijuana across the board, throughout the entire United States, what would happen to the Mexican drug cartels that everybody's so worried about? Do you need a wall anymore? Would there be a market anymore? If we're suddenly reaping the money, and it's become safer now, so it's not only not criminal, but it's actually being regulated by the federal government, and you can actually buy certain qualities.
Right, so you
marijuana.
actually get what you think you're buying, and not some random
Exactly.
substance.
Now we have regulations so that you really get what you're paying for. Exactly. And you can't have a Mexican drug cartel taking advantage of the fact that it's illegal here because it's not illegal here. So the only way to win the war on drugs is to stop fighting it.
Yeah. What is it? The only way to win is not to play the game or something like that.
War games.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. So I'm glad that telepathed through. The podcast, what's that called?
My podcast is called The Raw Men.
Okay, and you have.
And for any of your listeners, please let me know who I should talk to, because it's always a big trick to get somebody. I don't just want. I'm happy with celebrating authors, but I really want to talk to people that really are making a difference. So if you can find anybody who's willing to come on the show, 20 minutes to an hour, as long as we can keep it interesting, I want to hear from people who are making a positive difference.
There you go, listeners. Talk to Aron, and you're still doing YouTube, right?
Oh, I am having so much fun with this.
And where do they find you on YouTube? Just Aron Ra?
ARONRA. And I'm a full-time activist. I have been since 2014. So all of my support, all of my financial support comes from patreon.com/ARONRA. I am an official representative of American Atheists, but I am that because I'm an activist already anyway. So I frequently go down to the state capitol to give testimony to the state house or to the Board of Education or what have you. I do an awful lot of traveling, not just protesting things, but also confronting people and trying to do what I can to improve education and all of that. I promote skepticism. I promote rationalism, science education. And I can teach basic science as well. My wife is a curriculum specialist with the Next Generation Science Standards, and so we do what we can to, improve education stats and maybe provide videos that would help people with short lessons. I mean, there's a lot of talented people you can find on YouTube nowadays, but we're adding our voices to that to teach lessons that often public school teachers skip over or don't understand well enough to teach, to be honest.
Sure. Now, a totally different thing. You ran for office, and you were on the show, about a year ago, actually,
Yeah.
getting ready for that run. Walk us through what you were running for and how that went.
Well, it had been that in the last few election cycles that there had been no Democratic candidate. There'd be just the Republicans doing their primary, and then it would be the surviving Republican would run alone, unimpeded. And I decided it's not going to be this way this time. And even though I know what I look like, I know how people would react to me, but damn it, if there had to be some kind of opposition. Honestly, if I'd run last time, I would be the
Right.
only Democratic candidate.
And
Can you imagine that?
You were some kind of opposition.
And what was funny is that the guy that I was running against, Bob Hall, had in the previous election cycle, he was running against another Republican, of course, and it was another right-wing, young earth creationist, dominionist, religious zealot, and they're criticizing each other about which one is the better Christian, when Bob Hall accused the other guy of being inspired by Satan.
Yeah.
So imagine how they would have reacted to me. Yeah. So and especially since if anybody's seen me in my goth attire, because I do have some of that kind of clothing, it would have been all too funny to actually have a debate with the Republican candidate. That would have been hilarious. But what ended up happening was that we had a biggest problem. A real huge problem every election of the recent elections. We always had people saying, "Don't vote; it's a broken system. Don't contribute to a broken system. Abstain. Protest by abstaining," which is the most miserable approach you can do. Not voting means you're just going to bend over and pull them apart for whoever you get.
Yep, that's what the Russians want.
Exactly. So I mean, you definitely need to vote. And yes, there are problems. And yes, there are problems on both sides. But this is always it's false equivalence that people want to argue. Well, there's problems on both sides. Yeah, there are. But there's a whole lot more problems and more snowflakes, I have to say, on the right than there are on the left. I am myself unapologetically on the left. I am not what a lot of people think of when they think of the generalized pejorative concept of the left. But I'll have to admit that there's like a handful of people that maybe go too far, and I wouldn't agree with this handful of people that go too far on the left, and there is nothing but shit stains on the right. What the hell are you going to do?
Yeah.
Let's look at this realistically. We are talking about, if we'd elected Hillary, we might have had a chance of going to war with Russia. We certainly had a chance of going to war with North Korea, right? We certainly had a chance of going to war with Russia even under Trump and Canada.
Yeah. Come on. Well, the thing is,
he pissed off every one of our allies.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I couldn't imagine if Putin had handpicked his own person for president of the United States. I don't think someone could do much better than Trump at breaking up the allies.
This is the guy who made it legal for the mentally deranged to buy guns,
yeah,
and then criticized the next 3 mass shootings on the excuse that that guy was mentally deranged. Well, who made it legal for the mentally deranged to buy guns? Why is no one paying attention to this? This guy is the one who pretended that he didn't know that about Standing Rock, that he didn't know about, 10,000 Native Americans protesting the setting up of that pipeline, that Obama, to his credit, backed down, even though Obama and Hillary were both personally invested in the Standing Rock pipeline. They both backed down to that protest. They said, "That's it. We're stopping it." And the Army Corps of Engineers stopped it. And then Trump got the election, and he pushed the pipeline through anyway. And what a surprise! It ruptured 50,000 gallons of crude oil into the public drinking water supply for people that live in such a remote area. They don't have bottled water to turn to.
Yeah.
Who could have foreseen that? Everybody that was there.
Yeah, it wasn't a thing. And, of course,
So Trump made it legal for industries to dump toxic waste into public aquifers, and Trump made it illegal to protest commercial ventures. So much for the First Amendment. Trump has spoken out against free speech. He has promoted religion against the First Amendment. He has threatened to prohibit the free exercise thereof, again, against the First Amendment. He's tried to criminalize the free press.
Yeah.
He has done everything he can to disrupt and oppose the First Amendment. You think you would have gotten all that from Hillary? I'm sure if Hillary was elected, we would have things to complain about. I didn't like her at all. I would certainly be complaining about Hillary. But you know what? I wish I could complain about the things that Hillary was doing rather than what we're having to deal with now.
Well, we can hope. So creationism, it's not your thing. You don't really think there was a real ARK before Ken built one.
We know for certain there was no damned ARK. Ken Ham knows there was no damned ARK.
Did you?
But I mean, think about this: a guy that has no ability to get a real job any other way.
Noah?
No, I'm talking Ham.
Oh, okay.
He gets all of this acreage given to him, literally $100 million investment, all coming from private people who want him to promote their, quote, truth, unquote. If you have to lie to defend your truth, it was never truth to begin with.
Yeah, that's one thing I often tell religious people, that if what you believe won't stand up to discussion and dissection, it's probably not very good anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I walked beside Ken Ham, as I said, while the cameras were on him and Bill Nye having their conversation, and you can actually see the moment that Ken Ham looked to his left and recognized me standing there with him, holding my own camera up. He has this shocked look because he had just the day before named me in one of his sermons where he told his congregation to pray for me. And I knew that he would recognize me in a moment. And I'm literally I'm walking right next to him. But you see this shocked look on his face, and he can't say anything to me because he's got Bill Nye and a handful of movie cameras on him. What's he going to eat?
Yeah. There's
no way to distract. And the meeting of the eyes between him and I for that moment, that was beautiful for me. I loved that.
I could see how it was. So you went through the ARK a couple of years ago, and you weren't convinced? Is that what you're telling me?
Answers in Genesis hired somebody, or had somebody, one of their people, guide me through the ARK. And I made a video of this. And one of the things that I pointed out to this guy was when they come to what they call the Tyrannosaurus exhibit, which was a mini Tyrannus that was supposed to be a kind, quote.
Yeah.
And I said, well, there's one problem with this. Where are the feathers? And the guy's confused. I said, well, every dromaeosaurid had feathers. We now know that every single one of them had feathers. But, of course, Answers in Genesis can't have them look like we know they looked. We now know every single one. Velociraptors would have been indistinguishable from birds. They would not have looked like what you see in Jurassic Park. There were very close relatives of velociraptors, like Utah raptor and a couple of others that were the same size as the ones you see on Jurassic Park, but they were completely covered in plumes. They would have looked exactly like birds.
Because they were
fly.
Pretty much birds.
Yeah, they were flightless, beakless birds. Their tails were a bit longer than regular birds, and they had claws in their wings, and their wings were too short to fly with. But other than that, yeah, you're basically talking about flightless eagles.
Flightless eagles. Well, I mean, there have never been any other flightless birds, have there?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but I had an emu as a pet, living in my backyard for about 3 years until my neighbors just complained to tell the city, said, there actually is an ordinance against keeping ratites in a suburban neighborhood, which is really upsetting. I hate my neighbors for this. They made me give up my bird. I so loved that bird. He was 6'6" when he stood up straight. And he and I would take walks to the park at least twice a week. I didn't put him on a leash. He and I would just walk side by side a couple of blocks to the city park, and I would put my arm out when we get to the street, and so he would know when to cross. I'd pull my arm back, and so I would cross the street, and as soon as his feet hit the grass, he would do this weird fluctuation motion with his head and take off. I mean, he could run 40 miles an hour. And so I started bringing a 12-speed bicycle with me, not to keep up, because you can't keep up.
Yeah.
But to catch up, because he would only run for a minute like that, and then he would just saunter about for the rest of the day. And I knew that, I needed to be able to, if he takes off, then I need to be able to get where he is quickly. And I so enjoyed having that bird around. And the funny thing is you get to see how stupid other people are when they encounter something like this. When you walk up to somebody that has a 6-foot bird walking next to them, the idiotic things that people said, like one group of kids came up to me and asked me, aren't I afraid that he's going to fly away? Fly away? This thing wouldn't fly if it strapped a propeller to it.
Yeah.
And then somebody else thought it was a turkey.
Oh.
Imagine the Thanksgiving that family has if you
yeah, that's
a 120-pound turkey.
That's a heck of a meal.
And there was a point when he and I were walking to the park. We hadn't got to the park yet, and these kids came up, and they're like, they're playing with the bird. They like run up to the bird and make this like shriek noise, and then they run away. And the bird started playing back, and you could tell because of the motions. There's a body language. The bird knows he's playing. Where he would run after the kids and they would like dance at each other. I don't know how to describe this if you're in audio only, but there's this weird dance they would do. You can tell it's a game. It's a game on both sides. The kids are having a game. The bird is having a game. So he'd like run right up to the kids instead of disemboweling them. He would just do this weird dance and then run the other way or something like that. And funny thing is that somebody called the police that day saying that there was an eagle attacking children.
Wow.
Eagle.
Yeah, those two animals don't look very similar, but
not remotely. But there was one intelligent 12-year-old boy that I met in the park where the bird liked to go swimming. I didn't know that emus like to swim. Australians aren't aware that emus like to swim, but they did. I would take mine down to the creek, and he would get into the river and actually just have a ball. But then he would go wandering through the trees and everything, and I'd do my best to follow him because I'm letting him have his time to wander around. He happened across these kids that were playing in the trees and the shrubs and everything. I don't know what playing like it's a jungle or you know how kids are, 12 years old. And then one of them saw the bird and freaked and said, "It's a dinosaur!" And he thought it was a pre-avian dinosaur. And when I encountered the kids, I've explained, you know what, you're absolutely right. That actually is a dinosaur.
Yeah,
and you're able to see that it's a dinosaur where a lot of people can't. And it doesn't change the fact that a chicken is a dinosaur and a parrot is a dinosaur. Those are all dinosaurs. It's just that the emu actually looks like one.
Well, I've seen plenty of birds walk, and you get that impression that they have that kind of pacing with the body, and they don't have arms per se to stick out in front of them, and their wings, and they're at their side, and they can keep their balance, and they can pick up food with their mouth. It's just so cool that they can balance that way, and they don't drag their tails on the ground. The other thing I wanted to ask is, do you have any conferences you're going to this fall? What's your schedule like?
Oh man, I only have one, and it's a big deal for me. I've been working for the last few years, I think 5 years now. I've been working on the Phylogeny Explorer project, where I've been trying to create a navigable online encyclopedia of the entire phylogenetic tree of life, the whole thing.
Whoa!
So that you can, follow from molecules to man, just like the creationists say. You can go through every clade, of which there's so many. I don't even know what the count is between the earliest organisms and humans for the different sequences in the interim. But we've been including everything. We have over 40,000 taxa documented so far. I found an entrepreneur who thought that this would be a great idea, and he's invested something close to 30,000 British pounds into the creation of this database, which took 2 years to design because we needed a database that was capable of certain alterations, but that could also withstand the wealth of information being put into it. And we now have a couple of dozen volunteers that have been working for the last 2 or 3 years on entering data. And we're trying to begin a second level of this where we start entering encyclopedic information for each of the taxa, which is difficult to do. And this is a project that will never be complete.
No. I was just going to say, you might as well go ahead and turn on what you have, because you're always going to add more.
Exactly. But the idea is that as we put it, turn on what we have, I'm going to be revealing this, unveiling it, making it available to the public in October. And I've been asked to do this at a full-on science convention. I'm going to the Tetrapod Zoology Conference in London, where I will be dealing with zoologists and paleontologists, and it is straight-up science conference. It's not humanists, not atheists, not skeptics, not rationalists. It's just straight-up science. And I will be presenting and unveiling the Phylogeny Explorer project there, and I will be treated as a scientist by scientists, which means my life will be complete and I can die then happy.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to ask, do you plan on a second book?
I do, and right now we are thinking about along the lines of the systematic classification of life as well. I mean, I've been doing a video series on that, and a number of people have said that I should be doing that as a book.
Because I know you're.
As a book. So when I wrote my first book, when I got to chapter 10, I said in the book, this actually could have been a book unto itself. It was already the longest chapter in that book, and I said there that I had to cut a few thousand words out of that just so that it wouldn't be unwieldy. It'd be like everything else is more or less within 1,000 words of being the same size, and then you've got this one that's like twice as long as everything else. It's just that's my interest, that's my passion. It's how things blend together, or how they not blend together. That's not a good way to put it, but defining ourselves as a part of nature rather than apart from it. And I think there's a certain beauty in seeing how things are related to each other. Let me put it this way. There are a lot of people that I've met that have no idea what state or country lies in all four of the primary directions around them. I can't be that way.
Wow.
I would be lost if I were that way. I mean, I need to know what time it is, what year it is, and what sequence things happened in. I mean, did we get televisions before or after automobiles? I mean, I know there's a lot of people that don't know, but I need to.
Yeah.
Because I want to know where I am geographically, chronologically, and phylogenetically. I want to know where we are, which direction we're going. I want to have some kind of a scope on that. And there's fortunately, there's been a lot of people working with me that have the same feeling. And I've gotten some people involved in the project that I'm really, really happy about. There was a group of autodidacts, people without formal education degrees, had put together a website called Paleos.com. And they made such a comprehensive encyclopedic volume describing paleospecies that the information you can't find anywhere else. That even though this was a half a dozen people that didn't have, they certainly didn't have doctoral degrees. I'm sure that some of them have, graduate degrees in some field, but they weren't doctorates. They weren't professional scientists. But they put together such a work of scientific appreciation that the scientific community began to cite it, began to source it, because it was so comprehensive.
Right.
That is my goal. I have the creative team for Paleos.com working for the Phylogeny Explorer project now. Everybody's working at a volunteer basis, but if they are advisors, and what we all want to do is have their site, which focuses primarily on geologic time periods, to be associated with our site, which of course is focusing on phylogenetic clades. And although there are a number of websites, and some of them are quite pretty, that you can look at to see the tree of life in a glimpse, in a sense,
right.
Ours has scientific application. Ours actually has value on an educational level, and ours will be peer-reviewed. And that's going to be my contribution to science.
Now,
So that's in October. October 6th and 7th, I'll be in London for that.
Oh, that's fantastic. If someone wants to know more about this or talk to you about your show or invite you to come speak at a conference, how do they reach you?
I made the easiest email address ever, aronra@gmail.
There you go. And for my listeners, in case you have any doubt, if you run into Aron, his name is pronounced like a nurse, Aron Ra. Aron, thank you so much for being on the show again. And it's about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. I will see you in Kentucky.
Yes, sir. Looking forward to it.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
There are people who believe that dinosaurs and men lived together, that they roamed the earth at the same time. There are museums that children go to in which they build dioramas to show them this. And what this is, purely and simply, is a clinical psychotic reaction. They are crazy. They are stone cold fuck nuts. I can't be kind about this, because these people are watching the Flintstones as if it were a documentary. Now, there is a big difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament, and that is the New Testament God is really kind of a great guy. He is, especially when you compare him to the Old Testament God, who is a prick. I don't know what happened to God, over time. How he matured, if he went to an anger management class. Or maybe just the birth of a son calmed him down. But before he had the kid, holy fuck, he was out of control.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
What a big surprise. It's that time of the show where we wrap things up. I'm going to keep it a little short because I think we've already gone too long. One of the things I forgot to mention about our little trip in Europe, Poland. We landed in Warsaw, and we went and got bus tickets to our hotel in Warsaw. We only stayed one night, and then we left and went north. Well, it turns out the bus tickets in Poland are timed. I'm used to when you buy a bus ticket, you get a ride. You might even get one transfer. And you get to your destination, you get off the bus, and your one ride is done. Just like a lot of subways have. Sometimes there's a perimeter or an outside distance, but, within the metro area, you buy one ticket, you get one ride, When you get off the train, your ride is over. You buy another ticket if you want to get on again. Easy. Well, it turns out in Poland, the tickets are timed. So we bought the basic ticket, assuming we needed one ride. No big deal. We're at the airport. We get on the bus. And it turns out the ticket that we bought, the cheapest ticket that we could buy, was a 20-minute ticket, which means you are only allowed to be on the bus for 20 minutes. And I don't mean 20 minutes in real time. They have a chart, we found out later, that shows you the time from this stop to this stop. So you can buy the proper ticket. And it doesn't matter if the bus takes 30 minutes or 12 minutes. You can only go so much distance, what would normally take the bus 20 minutes, and then you have to get off. Well, we're riding this bus, and it's myself and my wife and 2 kids. And about 21 minutes into the bus ride, a ticket inspector gets on. And I don't think it's coincidental that the ticket inspector gets on at 21 minutes, because anyone that gets off at the airport and buys a 20-minute ticket is now on the bus longer than they're supposed to be on the bus. So he saw us as clearly not being people from Poland and came right up to us and asked for our tickets, which we proudly showed him our tickets, and his little machine reads them. And then the shit hits the fan, and the next stop is our stop. So our stop is technically like 23, 24 minutes from the airport, but we only had 20-minute tickets. So he collects all of our information, asks for documents, and then slaps us with a fine. And the fine, I think, worked out to be about $45 a person, and there were 4 of us. So we got hit with a $180 penalty for not having valid bus tickets because our tickets had expired. Because when you step on the bus, you put them in the machine and it stamps them. So we had 20-minute tickets, and we were on the bus 22 minutes when he scanned them, and we paid a $180 fine in Poland. It's real money in Poland. I mean, it was actually seemed like a scary large amount, but it almost kind of wiped us out of all the cash that we had in zlotys. And it was a very unfortunate way to start a visit to a country, and I called it the Welcome to Poland tax. So be advised when you ride a bus in a foreign country that you make sure you actually know that you're getting the right ticket, because the prices can be expensive. Of course, it made a cab ride look like a hell of a deal, but the bus was convenient, went right to where we were going, and we thought we knew what we were doing, but we fucked up and had a big old penalty. And I'm glad we had cash, because if you don't pay cash, the tickets are actually like 20-25% higher, which is a weird kind of system. But anyway, that was some fun in Poland. But like I said, we greatly enjoyed the trip, and hopefully someday I can take another journey somewhere. Coming up this fall, I do have every expectation of being at CSI Con in Las Vegas. I think that is mid-October. Shit, I'll have to double check. And then a few weeks later, I intend to be at the FFRF convention in San Francisco. So hopefully you can make one of those 2 conventions. I'd love for you to stop by and say hello. And until I see you in person or the next show, ciao.